Good morning, everybody. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Fire Commissioners. The date is Tuesday, July 17th, and the time is about 9:05. Thank you. Flag salute, name is silence.
Please join me in a moment of silence in honor of past and present members of the Los Angeles Fire Department who have devoted their lives to the protection of our community. Thank you.
Okay. So we start, as always, with commissioner comments.
We actually, several of us attended the family orientation for the new recruits, and as always, a good event.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, it was actually an excellent event. It's, once again, as always, it's great to see the diversity, and it keeps improving every time. I do also want to say and point out that the fact that we're acknowledging paramedics as much as possible and the value of paramedics at these orientations and in the academies is really fantastic as well. And it was great to see Dr. Hara and Jimmy Woods Gray, Commissioner. We went to pancake breakfast at Fire Station 35. It was very successful. I like to see the community engagement with the fire stations. And I got to see union representatives, Chief Hogan there, everybody showed up. Councilmember Rue was great. It's really wonderful to have that engagement, and it's really imperative. I also want to commend the department on the Griffith Park fire and the rapid pace for extinguishing it. I actually watched it firsthand. I went down there because I live close, and it was very impressive to see the department hit something that hard and that fast and see so many resources deployed and how imperative that is, and see the evacuations and see county there. It was quite an operation. It was very impressive, and I feel very, very fortunate that we all live in this city to have such an incredible department. And Chief Boyer, Chief Hogan, thank you so much. And that's it. Thank you.
So moving on to report of Fire Chief.
Thank you, Madam President. On July 3rd, the last commission meeting, I attended the funeral for the Long Beach Fire Captain, David Rosa. It was a strong presence by the fire service. It was a tremendous tragedy for Captain Rosa to be killed the way he was. They were doing what they're trained to do. They were responding to a fire in a senior citizens assisted living facility. And he went in a stairwell, and he was leading the charge in front of his crew. And they got to the second floor. He was shot by somebody waiting in the stairwell. It's a tremendous tragedy. We've been in constant communication with Long Beach. Immediately following that, within the hour, we had offered plenty of support, and we continued with that support throughout the week, all the planning and all the things that they had to deal with. We knew what they didn't know, and our people did an amazing job to support the effort with the planning staff, the honor guard, the peer support. Our shops outfitted their engine to hold the casket for Captain Rosa. A lot of things. And that's when the fire service comes together. Unfortunately, we had another tragedy this weekend, a Cal Fire heavy equipment operator. His dozer rolled and he died. So we must never forget how dangerous our job is. And we're gonna look at that report from Long Beach when it's complete to see, is there anything that we can do to keep our people safe? Because we encounter many of the same threats when we respond to shooting incidents We have responded to fires in the past, and it turned out to be a fire and a homicide, and the shooter's still there. And that's not unusual for us, and we've been, knock on wood, lucky. So we're going to look at that and we'll see what we can do. On July 8th, last Sunday, we reactivated 4 engines that were closed 7 years ago at Fire Station 1, 20, 73, and 75. And I thought it was important that we get out there and we meet the council offices, the council members, and meet the crews that Sunday morning. So we hit 4 stations starting at 8 o'clock Sunday morning. We started at 75s and went to 73s, and we went to 20s, we went to 1s. And the mood was palpable. Our people are realizing that the department is being restored. And those engines proved to be valuable last week. One of them, Engine 73, was one of the first engines to that major emergency fire in the valley, structure fire. Engine 1 went to a good brush fire up there in Radio Hill. So they're being put to work, and they will prove a valuable resource to the communities that they're restored to. We're going to have a press conference on that tomorrow with the mayor at Dodger Stadium and all the council offices. On the 10th, we did have family orientation. I went there as well with our commissioners, and it's always a great event. Our young firefighter candidates are so excited, very nervous. When you shake their hands, you have to dry your hand with a towel because they're so nervous, and I get it. It's a big change. You're embarking on a lifestyle it's very unusual. It's not your normal job. It's something where you come to work one day, you may be gone for a week, like we did last year during the Latuna fire and that first week in December. But they're always so full of energy and optimistic, and we have to instill that sense of teamwork early and let them know that we have jobs for all of you. It's my goal that someday that we'll graduate all of them. And that's a lofty goal. It probably will never happen, but I want to push them towards achieving that because that means more of them will graduate. That's what we want. On the 11th, I was invited to speak to the new advanced providers, the nurse practitioners, physician assistants that we hired. Dr. Eckstein invited me, and he has 3 members that he hired, and we matched them with firefighter paramedics, and they're undergoing training, and 3 advanced provider response units will be put into operation on July 23rd. So that's next Monday. And we've been working towards this for a while. So these 3 plus the 2 that we already have, the sober unit, the one at 15s, that'll give us 5. We're starting to really get some scale to these initiatives that started off as a pilot. And it's been a long road. It was a pilot, the metrics, the funding, the hiring, and now we're there. The apparatus are all there in place. So I'm very excited about Monday and the impact that it's going to have in the communities that they serve. So that's a big step for us. And then on this past Saturday, I attended with the mayor and our new police chief, Chief Moore, the mayor's crisis response team graduation at the Public Works Commission room. And that's always another very positive event. There was 27 graduates. They do what we can't. They are specially trained to be active listeners, to be a resource, to be a support mechanism for those families that are touched by tragedy. And our firefighters and paramedics, we go there, we handle the problem, whatever it is, and we move on because we have another call waiting. And I've always felt that we could do more. And the crisis response team is that tool to allow us to do more. So I'm always happy to attend that, and we'll have more of those in the future. That completes my report.
Great, thank you. Moving on to verbal report by the department on significant incidents, July 3rd to July 16th.
Good morning, Madam President, members of the Fire Commission, Chief Terrazas, Attorney Raffish, and to the management and staff of the LAFD. My name is Armando Hogan, Deputy Chief in charge of Operations West Bureau. My purpose here today is to share with you a significant incident that recently took place in West Bureau. On Tuesday, July 10th at roughly 2:09 p.m., Operations West Bureau Resources responded to the Griffin Park area in Hollywood on a reported brush fire. This was incident number 934. The first responding units found approximately 2 acres of grass and light vegetation burning northwest of the Griffith Observatory with a light wind and topography driven. There were no structures threatened, and our resources looked to anchor the fire and begin the process of flanking it with a strong airship attack while additional resources were requested. After establishing a command post location in the parking lot just north of the Greek Theater and gaining additional situational awareness, a unified command component was implemented with LAPD and our park rangers. Based on the Herculean effort of our firefighters, the forward progress of this fire was stopped at roughly 10 acres, and as 4 LA County Fire Department camp crews were requested to assist ground operations and to get hose lines completely around the fire. While these operations were being conducted, the LAFD, with the assistance of park rangers and LAPD, effectively evacuated over 2,000 individuals from the observatory and nearby park areas. At 3:30 p.m., our focus shifted to the continuity of operations for all of Griffith Park, including a concert that was scheduled at the Greek Theater. A field incident management team was dispatched and stood up to assist with the incident dynamics, including maintaining effective communication with park representatives and addressing their economic concerns. There were nearly 100 firefighters who responded, and after walking the perimeter of the blaze, it was determined that the fire involved 25 acres total. 2 firefighters and 1 camp crew member received minor injuries. They were all treated and released. Later that evening, after relocating the command post to the observatory parking lot, the Greek Theater was open for business as the scheduled concert was allowed to proceed as planned. On July 11, 2018, the incident commanders agreed to utilize our unmanned aerial system, our drones, to gain a comprehensive look at the burn area and discuss deployment models based on the gathered information. The cause of this fire is still undetermined, and Operations West Bureau will be meeting with the staff at Griffith Park to discuss challenges faced and what we learned from this incident. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Commissioner Nyberg for you being there and giving us clear and concise direction at this incident. So,
Saved a lot of lives, did you?
but no, you did ask excellent question, and I appreciate the fact that you continually tried to stay out of what we were doing as I continually tried to pull you in. So thank you very much. So with that, I'll take any questions that you all may have.
Was Commissioner Nimberg wearing proper PPAs?
Yes, sir, she was. She did not have her helmet on. She had on her brush jacket, but no helmet. We addressed that, sir. She's been counseled.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, good job with the fire, so thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Great. Do we have a verbal report by the medical director?
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Mark Eckstein, EMS Bureau Commander. Significant EMS incidents on July 14th, approximately 4 o'clock in the morning, on the 10 westbound of the 110 freeway. There was a large bus apparently returning from a casino outing that lost control, hit a K-rail, and swerved and ended up on its side. We ended up with a total of 15 paramedic ambulances and 11 BLS ambulances, 4 fire companies and 2 truck companies to manage this incident. A total of 25 patients were transported to area hospitals. Fortunately, none of the injuries were considered life-threatening. 5 met trauma center criteria, 20 did not. This was a very good drill in terms of MCI. Favorable conditions included the time of day, light traffic, and the availability of rescue ambulances. Local hospitals were placed in a disaster mode. There was excellent coordination between our members, Medical Alert Center, and area hospitals, and this incident was successfully mitigated. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have any presentations, so we're moving on to consent agenda items.
If I could ask that one of the items here, this is item 4C, can we take that with item 5C or 5D together?
Sure.
Great. Move to adopt recommendations for items 4A, B, D, and E.
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
Okay, so then our first regular agenda item is a report by the Department of Professional Standards Division. It's a response to the Independent Assessor's Discipline Settlement Agreement audit.
Good morning, President Ybarra, Commissioners, Chief Terrazas, City Attorney. Stephen Gutierrez, Assistant Chief, Professional Standards Division. Before you, you have Board of Fire Commissioners file number 18-055. This is the Professional Standards Division response to the Independent Assessor's Discipline Settlement Agreement Audit. In May 15, 2018, the Office of the Independent Assessor presented an audit on the Department's disciplinary settlements in 2017. In that presentation, there was one recommendation made by the Office of the Independent Assessor, and that was that the Department collaborate with the Office of the City Attorney and this Office of Independent Assessor to formulate a template for settlement agreements for the Board of Fire Commissioners' approval. The Department concurs with the recommendations made by the Office of the Independent Assessor, and Professional Standards Division has set forth and established with the City Attorney a template which is presented as well as an attachment. The template itself contains all the provisions that are relevant and all the provisions that are within the adopted Board of Fire Commissioners policy. It ensures consistency and accuracy in all the settlement agreements, and with that, the Department will continue to collaborate with the Office with the City Attorneys throughout the settlement process. In conclusion, the Department is in agreement that the Office of this Independent Assessor's recommendation is essential and necessary to ensure that all written settlement agreements are consistently drafted and reviewed. To that end, the creation and adoption of the settlement agreement template further enables the Department to ensure fairness, impartiality, and compliance throughout the disciplinary process. Ready to answer any questions if you may.
Okay. So I'll get to the only major issue about this is the settlement agreement looks fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's standard and has all the standard provisions. The key thing that I think we're going to hear from UFAC in a little bit is that they're going to object to Section 14, which is part of the direction that we gave to the Department was that it have a provision that guarantees review by the independent assessor. They would like the members' name and EID number redacted, and so I've spoken to them and I told them that my position is that she's always had access to that information, so it should continue the same. But I know that they've reached out to other people, so I want to know what other commissioners think about that.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep it in.
Is there?
Go
ahead.
So I just had another question on the document, unrelated. But
Okay.
So this is a great step to have this. So thanks for getting this done quickly. I noticed this is just for education-based discipline, and I know there are other things that come out of that could come out of a settlement.
Yes.
And I think that it is. I think the more sort of, I presume you might have other documents sort of floating around that might kind of get stuck together in the file, but I think the more different documents you have, the more opportunity there is for mistakes to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna vote to approve this for today, but what I would ask is that you come back with a more complete template that actually addresses all the possibilities, and it's not that complicated.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to write down every possibility in here, but what I would suggest is that you add in here a new section 9, which would be other conditions of settlement, and then it's as simple as saying the additional conditions will also apply to this agreement. You list them out, and then a section similar to you have the consequences associated with not meeting the education-based discipline. If these consequences, if those conditions are met, the following consequences, and then editing current paragraph 9 here to include not only the references to the paragraphs of education-based discipline, but also paragraphs related to the other conditions. So it's not a huge amount of work or edits in here, but if you could come back in 30 days with just a more complete contract in there. I just think it's much more complete. And it may be that there are no other conditions, in which case all you write is none in that section. But I think having the prompts in there and having one document that the assessor can look at, and that the chief can look at, and that the member has, that just lists everything in one place, I think it just makes organizational sense to me. So if that's okay for you to come back, so we can go ahead and, if everybody else is okay, to go ahead and move forward with this, but just bring back a
Just for clarity, just describe again what
sure
what your guidance is.
So it would be a new section 9, which would be titled Other Conditions, and would
What would you do with the current section 9?
that would become section 11, right? So basically, so it doesn't replace section 9. This would be something between 8 and 9. So everything else moves down a number. So new section 9 would be Other Conditions, and would go through members' title and last name agrees to the following additional conditions, and then you list them out on there, whether that's last chance contract or, they may get suspension combined with the education or whatever else. I know you come up with different things related to what the circumstances are, just what the point of the process is. But so list those out, and then you would need to then have a new section 10 that would say, failure to comply with conditions in section 9 would be the following, and then you list out what those consequences would be. And then now existing 9 now becomes section 11, which would just need to start to reference, instead of just referencing section 8, would need to reference sections 9 and 10.
Correct.
As part of that. And then I think everything else is fine. But that gets it all in one agreement, and I think at that point you've got a great template.
Okay.
Make sense? Does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
It should be noted that each and every settlement itself they're all unique, and they will have even other provisions within them that we may not even be aware of, that the city attorney may require in there. So we'll do that, and we'll also continue to review each and every one of them with the city attorney before any signatures.
Yeah, and totally recognize the uniqueness of each one. I think that's appropriate. I think having these additional sections in there, it just one, it puts everything in one place. Mm-hmm. 2, it just creates a prompt to narc everything down in there. And there may be stuff beyond that happens, but it gives us a good sort of minimum template to say, what else do we need to put in here? And then until I understand we have a vacancy in our chief investigator position, perhaps until that chief investigator is on board, it may behoove you to just work with the independent assessor while you're sort of working through some of these things. I know you've had a good working relationship so far, so encourage you to continue to do that even after you get a chief investigator, but just to support you in the process.
Got it.
Okay. Go ahead and move the recommendations. Councilor, did you say as amended, or move the recommendations as amended for, this is item 5A.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, we need to take public comment. My bad.
Yes, we do. So we have a comment from Freddie Escobar of UFLAC.
Good morning, Chief Terrazas, President Ibarra, and Honorable Commissioners. Freddie Escobar, and I proudly serve as Second Vice President of the United Firefighters of Los Angeles, representing 3,300 firefighters, paramedics, dispatchers, and inspectors of the Los Angeles Fire Department. I'm here to speak about the recommendation actions within the independent assessor's audit and some proposed modifications to the process that will respect the privacy of our members. We support the formulation of a template for settlement agreement. However, we believe that it is extremely critical that the names be redacted from those files to protect those in our department. Just like the President of the Commission said, it is number 14. We believe, and our position is, all we're asking is to redact the identification of it. We believe that commission and the independent assessor still have access. Our position is just to redact the names. That's it. It's not going to change any data. It's not going to change access to it. It's just to redact the names. Just because it's been going on doesn't mean it's right. Our goal is not to hindrance to the development or procedures that improve the effectiveness, efficiency of the settlement agreement, but rather to ensure that the rights and protection of our members is paramount in any final consideration of this commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so
Move to adopt the recommendation for the report as amended and the recommendations for item 5A.
A second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that's 5A. 5B is verbal report by the medical director on skilled nursing facility summit and issues related to response to such facilities.
Hello again, everyone. Dr. Mark Eckstein, EMS Bureau Commander. This is a brief verbal report on efforts the department has taken to work with our stakeholders regarding skilled nursing facilities. On April 16th of this year, I was fortunate to participate in a seminar that was initiated by several EMS captains and geographical bureau captains to work with Cedars-Sinai and local skilled nursing facility directors, medical directors, and administrators to facilitate coordination, ultimately have a better understanding of our capabilities, tiered dispatch, difference between the levels of service vis-a-vis EMTs versus paramedics, a better understanding of advanced directives, physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment or PULSed forms, and in general, how do we better serve a vulnerable elderly population. The seminar was very well attended, including Chief Hogan and myself and other members of the department. There were physicians, administrators, nurses, providers, paramedics, EMS captains there. I think it was a very healthy dialogue. Again, the goal is to foster better understanding, better collaboration, and ultimately improve care and afford a better efficiency for our resources. We don't have any metrics as a result of this meeting. It was more of a qualitative seminar with a very good exchange of information and ideas. And I'm encouraged that we'll develop and further codify best practices from this meeting, and then have similar meetings with various other stakeholders in other areas of the city. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
So I heard it was a great meeting. I was wondering if you could talk a little about some of the problems that came up during the seminar that were discussed, and if anybody had any solutions that were part of the discussion.
I think it's basically, I think the goal of the seminar, and I agree, I think it was very well received, is just to enhance communications. I think it's challenging for our members to respond to facilities many, many times. By definition, the patients of these facilities have multiple comorbidities, and it's imperative that our folks have a very good understanding to quickly delineate the wishes of these patients in terms of how aggressively they want to be treated, if they want to be transported to the hospital. Sometimes there's conflict between family members at the bedside versus the patient's documented wishes and the staff at these facilities. So I think the seminar was extremely successful because I think we had very good lines of communication. All parties left with a better understanding of how we can improve care to this elderly population and leave the communication lines open to hopefully mitigate problems in the future, but if any problems arise, everyone knows to whom they can reach out before these things kind of fester. We've had some conflicts in the past at these facilities where a family member wants their loved one transported, and that's in conflict with their advanced directive, or a nurse calls the physician on call because they have normal vital signs, and all roads tend to lead to a 911 call. And we want to make sure our paramedics and EMTs have very clear direction, and everybody involved understands our capabilities and the policies and procedures under which our paramedics operate. So I think that communication was very, very well received. It was very healthy dialogue, and I'm optimistic we'll be able to build upon that, not just in the West LA area, in and around Mid-City, around Cedars-Sinai, but also other areas of the city.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I also heard that it was very, very well received summit and extremely important as well. When is your next summit planned? And is this going to be ongoing? And are there outcomes that you're looking for specifically? Or, I mean, I know you said it's communication, but also just making sure that this becomes an ongoing dialogue. Are there plans for that?
Not yet. To your point, though, certainly the goal is not one and done, as it were.
Right.
We want to make sure that we build on the success. I want to recognize Captain Jeff Arnold, Cameron Langens, and Rico Gross, who really drove the creation and execution of this seminar. I was honored to be a part of it, as was Chief Hogan. I was extremely impressed with their professionalism and management skills to help put this together. Also, their comments during this seminar were extremely professional. I think one thing that was clearly evident by every comment made by everyone from our department, really everybody there, was the goal was how do we improve the quality of life for these individuals, because simply transporting these individuals to the hospital for what might be futile care is not necessarily the best care. And I think that's where it's critical to have a good understanding. One of the speakers also was Dr. Mosqueda, who's now the Dean of Keck School of Medicine of USC, and she's a friend and colleague. Her expertise is in geriatric medicine and elder abuse and end-of-life care. So she brought some very valuable issues to the table. To your point, I think we're going to, in terms of metrics, we'll look at utilization of our resources from skilled nursing facilities, codify best practices, and then again meet with stakeholders in other parts of the city. As you know, skilled nursing facilities do account for a not insignificant percent of 911 calls. But unlike the sudden unanticipated medical or traumatic emergency, these are individuals with multiple medical problems, also perhaps multiple mental health issues. And we have to be everyone has to be cognizant of what the patient's wishes are, which are usually delineated in writing. We have to determine if the family member has durable power of attorney in terms of making the patient's healthcare decisions. And if there's conflict, everyone has to be professional and ultimately keep the patient's best interests in mind.
Are you driving this summit? Was this?
This is, I'm very happy to say, this was driven by largely Captain Jeff Arnold, who works with Chief Hogan, and two of my EMS captains, Captain Langens and Captain Gross, EMS 5 and EMS 18. They really took the initiative on this, and I was honored to be invited to be a speaker and be part of it. And we'll work closely with them. And I think this was what was so unique about this, the fact that we had 3 EMS captains, 2 working under my bureau, 1 working for Chief Hogan and Operations West Bureau, to take this initiative where they saw the need, where they had a vulnerable population with a high EMS utilization rate, with ongoing friction and misunderstanding, and said, hey, you know what, let's come together, collaborate, have communications, let's have this seminar, bring all the parties together to develop best practices, better collaboration, and I really couldn't be more proud of them. They took the initiative, and I tell you, in my 22 years in the department, I'd never seen that before, where we had Captain Ones really take that kind of initiative and be that professional to bring together stakeholders from that many disciplines to culminate in such a successful seminar. So it was extremely well received and reflected very, very well on our department and its members.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Do all patients who are in skilled nursing facilities currently have a POST form or not?
They should. I think
that was my understanding. They're supposed to have a POST form. And I know the issue frequently comes up, not necessarily in SNF, but rather a situation where a patient is at home, has a POST form that says, do not take me to the hospital, and yet maybe a caretaker, not the regular caretaker, ends up calling 911, and that puts the firefighter in a difficult situation because my understanding is they're supposed to honor the POST form.
Yes, sir, you're correct. I think one of the great advancements we've seen here in the state is the development of the POST forms, as physicians' orders for life-sustaining treatment. I think some of the problems arise really where the patient's not in extremis or cardiac arrest. It's they have some other medical complaint, shortness of breath or sepsis or something along those lines, altered mental status. And that's where you have to really read, the devil's in the details, as it were, to determine really what is the patient's wishes in terms of hospital transport and how aggressively our members need to be with resuscitative efforts and how aggressively the physicians and nurses need to be at the receiving hospital. So I would say the overwhelming majority of patients upon whom we respond now, these facilities do have pulse forms because the advanced directives are very cumbersome and they're really not amenable to paramedics to sift through when someone is under duress right in front of them at that moment.
So, just returning to the question of the calls generated. So you had mentioned, certainly one complication is for our members when they show up is they get there and they don't know what to do, whether to transport somebody or not. But you also mentioned just 911 being a sort of go-to remedy for really anything that seems like it's out of the ordinary, including a fall out of bed. Which I think it generates call load, but also generates wall time, presumably for us, because if we're taking folks who are less urgent, presumably our members are going to be standing there for some time. Can you talk a little bit about the discussion around that and any solutions that came out of that or ideas for solutions that might have come out of that?
So, to your point, our paramedics and firefighters are trained to jump in, resuscitate, stabilize, and transport. This is a situation where it's a hurry up and slow down and gather some situational awareness and determine what the patient's wishes are. If a family member is directing them to provide certain level of care, do they have that legal right with power of attorney? So there's a lot of complicating factors. In addition, what may seem like a minor trauma, such as a ground level fall or fall out of bed, in this population, many of those folks are on blood thinners, and that may portend a life-threatening bleed, particularly intracranial hemorrhage. So we also tied in a nexus to our new advanced provider response units, particularly when I have one at Station 58, which is in Cedar's catchment area. And we anticipate, we're going to have meetings coming up with leadership from those hospitals to say a tool that will be available to our members on these calls would be to request the advanced provider response unit, where we have a advanced provider to assist in the decision making and be an additional liaison. So they were very excited at that. But these are high-risk patients. So we're trying to balance the wishes of the patients with their medical need, with risk management. And it's a very different and complex set of circumstances that's different from most of our calls.
So I'm confused because it's a skilled nursing facility, right? So are family members there usually when our resources arrive?
Often they generate the call. So there may be a call generated because the vital signs are outside the parameters that direct the staff to call 911 or call the physician who says call 911 because the physician's not in-house. Or a family member's at the bedside and they perceive their loved one's mental status to be altered or there's something about them that's not quite right, and they generate the call, unbeknownst to staff there.
Okay, so it sounds like there's communication problems between the family and the skilled nursing facility, right?
Right. The key word in all this, as Madam President, as you mentioned, this comes down to communication. Communication between the family members and the staff, our members, family members, staff, and ultimately the patient may not be able to speak for themselves, and all they may have is a written document. So effective communication is imperative, and I think that was really the take-home message from the seminars, is to know, to develop a rapport by what everyone brings to the table, different scopes of practice, and again, how do we improve care? While certainly we're cognizant of wall time, these are very high-risk patients. The goal really is to honor their wishes in terms of advanced directives, pulse forms, minimize friction, and everyone has to have a very good understanding. Ultimately, a patient made a decision, and we need to honor that.
Okay.
So I do get all that, but I think there's, certainly there are, as with anything, there are good actors and there are less good actors. And presumably, if they were at the conference, they're probably in the good actor category. If they wanted to be there to try to solve some of the problems, there are a lot of folks out there, a lot of facilities out there who, may be less interested in problem solving and are more interested, frankly, in just assigning minimum resources and on their own dime, and then using the city's resources as their backup. And did that come up, and was there any sort of discussion about how to deal with that? I certainly, look, you have. I've been on calls to nursing homes with some of our rescues and crews a bunch of times, and certainly there's a good percentage of them where somebody needs to go to the hospital because they're septic or whatever, but there's also been those times when it just seems like the facility didn't want to deal. Did that come up as an issue, and any thoughts on how to deal with the folks who weren't at the table and may never come to the table?
So I agree. I think the people there, it says a lot, the folks who showed up because they want to be part of the solution and improve care for their patients and their families. We have encountered institutions, there's been some notorious cases of skilled nursing facilities and nursing homes where their staff has been directed not to perform CPR. They're concerned about risk management issues, even though the Good Samaritan law protects them, and all roads lead to 911. I think the best way to deal with those institutions is that's where our APRUs come in, because these are highly complex patients, and our paramedics are not in a position, nor would I want to put them in the position for them to determine that these individuals don't need to go to the hospital, when by definition these are patients with multiple medical problems. So short of legislation, which I know has been an ongoing discussion amongst the electeds at both the city, state, and county levels, if they call, we're going to respond. Our members will do the best they can to determine the patient's wishes, if there's anything in writing in terms of advance directive. We're operationalizing how to include the APRUs in some of the calls that you allude to, where there's no apparent significant injuries, and perhaps we can keep the patient there. And I will tell you, from my perspective as a physician for 30 years, if there's a way to keep these patients in that institution, in their home environment, it's much, much better for them psychologically in their milieu. They decompensate in the hospital. So we want them to keep them comfortable, but we don't want to put our paramedics in a very precarious position where they're trying to overrule the decision by a family member or staff member to go to the hospital. I think that's an evolving role for APRUs, where patient safety is paramount, and also to facilitate and foster better understanding.
Yeah, sure, and that all makes sense. I guess two last thoughts on that would be, one is there's certainly in a number of facilities, I think there's a prevention aspect. And so I'm curious if we are able to engage similar to how we would engage with, other aspects of prevention that we do, whether it's fire alarms or fire prevention. And maybe that is part of what an APRU could accomplish is, you have a frequent caller, and the call is frequently people falling out of bed. Maybe think about putting some rails on the bed or something like that. So that's certainly on the prevention and the working with piece. But you mentioned legislation happening. Was that discussed at this seminar, or did that not really come up?
Kind of peripherally, because obviously there was no electeds there. Mm-hmm. It was basically, again, how do we better improve our operations to serve these individuals and their families? And that's really what it came down to. So I just think we need to be very cautious. It's a slippery slope. We don't want our paramedics to be under the impression that they're looking for a reason not to transport. We want to make sure that they honor the patient's wishes, which would be in writing. Always be professional with the family and staff, and try to be as proactive as possible. So our EMS captains are very much, we have them very much on the radar. If they have frequent calls from these type of facilities, they're supposed to be proactive, engage with leadership. If they're unsuccessful, EMS Bureau leadership and GEO Bureau leadership will assist them with these meetings. And you're right, some institutions have been completely recalcitrant, unwilling to meet. Others, like the individuals who showed up there, want to collaborate. So I feel the majority want to help. We want to expand this cooperation in these types of seminars, and I think it was a very good start.
All right. Well, it sounds good. And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that paramedics should legislate from the bedside and decide whether to take a patient or not. That is clearly our responsibility collectively as leadership. And my question was more of, how are we taking on that responsibility to try to address some of those issues. So if we don't know the answer yet, then that's okay. But I think that there is certainly some work to be done there around thinking about how we ensure that our resources aren't misused in cases, and that's, as you said, it's not about a paramedic showing up and deciding whether to transport or not in those cases, but it is about us thinking about, what does the data show us, and communication is a great start, and we're going to get a lot solved that way, but just as with building unwanted alarms, communication works for a lot of people, but for some people they just don't care, and they can account for a large volume of calls that take resources away from obviously other critical patients or needs. So I'm interested to continue that conversation. I think it's great that you are going to do more. I would love for us to stay updated on as this develops, because I think it is a significant issue, not just in West LA, but West Valley as well, probably in a number of other spots too. It's not, and it's only going to become more of an issue as we have an aging population. So I think it'd be great for us to continue to hear how this is going, and certainly my commendation to the EMS captains you mentioned, and they deserve some recognition from the department for their efforts on this. I think it was a great effort on their part, and congratulations to them.
Thank you. Yeah, they play a vital role, and I think this really underscored the role they do play, and the paramedics rely on them 24/7. So we hope to build on that success. Thank you.
It's a good job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You'll come back and report to us if you have any further meetings like this.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So that's report by the medical director. 5C is report by the department on the Coupa update, first and second quarter.
Good morning, Commissioners. Chief Terrazas, City Attorney Rafish, Royce Long, Cooper Program Manager in the Fire Prevention Bureau. And today I'm going to give an update on the Cooper inspection progress for second and third quarters of this fiscal year. The 4 programs being revised today include the Hazardous Materials and Business Emergency Plan Program, the Underground Storage Tank Program, the California Accident Release Prevention Program, and the Above Ground Petroleum Storage Tank Program. So with the report, I think what needs an explanation out of that is the inspection activity in the HAZMAT and Business Emergency Plan Program. We only hit 50% of our mark in that program, and the simple reason is that we had 5 bodies diverted out of that program into assisting other programs within the Bureau, and one of those was the cannabis program, just getting that up and started. So we had 2 that were moved into that program. We had another inspector that was put in the oil well inspection program. We had a vacancy, and we also had someone on IRD, and all these positions are out of their program for most of those second and third quarters, so it was a big impact for us. We do have all those positions back again, so we're fully staffed, and our inspection rate is back to where it needs to be, and we're on track, so no problems there. In the other programs, we either met or exceeded our inspection goals, so no issues going forward. For the enforcement, we had 9 cases for the reporting period, collected $229,000 in penalties. Our HAZMAT program is always a problem getting businesses to submit their inventories in our state database, and so we've moved forward with the city attorney's office to have a late submittal fee put in place for that. Seems to be a solution that's working across the state, so we're going to pursue the same. And then just lastly, the program we don't report on is the hazardous waste program. We oversee that program in the city, but it's administered by LA County Fire Department, and we only get a report from there once per year. I am required as the Cooper manager to audit their program, and we do a summary audit every year. Then on every 3rd year, we do a very comprehensive audit of their program, and that was just it's just about finalized. We're meeting with LA County next week to go over the deficiencies that we found in their program. One of them particularly serious, and they're just draft deficiencies right now. We need to discuss it with the county first and make sure we both agree on them, and I'd be willing to come back on a future commission and report on that. That concludes my report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
So I want to start with what you talked about LA County. So is that like their jurisdiction, but we're helping them with it? I'm just sort of unclear with that.
No, quite the opposite. So they do inspections within LA City. They do hazardous waste inspections. And that's usually, on the bigger Coopers, that's part of the program. So normally that would be under my jurisdiction, and I would be doing the inspections for that program with my staff. But back in '96, that program was given over to the county had already been doing it. And when the Cooper got started in the statewide, we signed off for the county to continue doing with the hazardous waste inspections. But it's not really normal for a large Cooper to not have that program, and we don't have it. And so it's under the Chief Terrazas' strategic plan to investigate and bringing that program back. And doing this evaluation is really just part of that process, in developing a case to bring the program back to LAFD.
So we do some hazardous waste investigations right now, right? Or we don't do any? I thought we did.
We don't do any hazardous waste inspections. We just oversee what they do in our city. Yeah.
Oh, so we do hazardous material.
Hazardous materials, yeah.
I see. Okay.
And how's that going? How's that going on bringing it back? I know that you're going to meet with them this week. You said next week?
Yeah, so we have a scheduled meeting next Wednesday to meet with LA County and my equivalent over there to talk about the deficiencies. And like I said, we have to, I don't really want to talk about the details because they may have a separate case to what, and so we need to kind of work out mutually what the deficiencies are going to be. So, yeah.
Okay.
But I think, there's problems that needs to be addressed, and one of them's very serious. And I've already raised it with the state, so it's going to be a big issue going forward.
Yes, you should address it with them first.
Yes.
Before you bring it to our attention. Well,
Right.
before you give us details.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, good job. You're on track, except for where you've had a couple of staff that have been focused on other issues.
Right. Yep. But we have them all back now, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
I move to adopt recommendations for item 5C.
I'll second.
All in favor?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to 5D, which is report by the department on the electronic patient care.
And this will also include 4C, which we held over for this one.
And
as well.
4C, which is it's the contract, right?
Yes,
That relates
correct. Good morning, Commissioners, Fire Chief, Madam Attorney, Scott Porter, Chief Information Officer, IT Bureau Commander. So I'm reporting on the status of electronic patient care report, which is, I think, good news and a long story of an upgrade that we have been doing on our electronic patient care reporting system. The system was originally put in 2010, and in March of 2017, we were following, I should clarify, the company's name is Stryker today. It was Physio Control when this agreement was made, so the amendment is under Physio Control, and it was another company in the original. So we're all talking about the same company, different versions of their software. In March of 2017, the department started an effort to upgrade the software to the latest version, which is a normal process for something like this. We had been using the company's software for many years up to that point. But when it was fielded, we started to realize that this version had some significant problems. Those problems were affecting our ability to actually complete our patient care reports. We complete about over 400,000 patient care reports a year, so this was a significant problem for us. In the detail of the report, it sort of gives you the chronology, but I'll just summarize it for you. We had issues. We worked cooperatively with the vendor for a number of months until we felt like we weren't getting anywhere, and we began to withhold payment. Over the course of several months, all the way through the remainder of 2017 and up until February of 2018, we worked with the vendor until the major problems were resolved and we accepted them. As a result of us withholding payment and renegotiating an amendment to the contract, the vendor agreed to forego 10 months worth of payments, which was about $1.1 million, and now we're going to continue paying them the normal amount on this contract for maintenance for the remainder of the contract. So the end of the story is it looks like we're through the major issues. Part of the amendment was also to clarify the escalation process. Throughout from the time we had these problems till the time they were resolved. The way that we worked together and how issues got escalated was not satisfactory to them or to us, so we've codified that in this amendment. And then this amendment also identifies 14 items that there were disagreement on, whether they were an enhancement that we weren't entitled to under the contract or a defect. Our view would be that they were a defect, so we went back and forth on those items and made sure that they got included in here as well. So going forward, as long as we continue to maintain the level of performance that we have today, and these items are resolved that we've identified, we feel like we can go forward in a normal operation with for the remainder of this contract. So I'll let it sit there and answer any questions that you have.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that all of the glitches have been taken care of and you are satisfied.
Yeah, I think the term "all" is one I wouldn't say. I certainly,
why I asked it.
I certainly wouldn't speak for the EMS Bureau there. I think we've come to an agreement where this is a workable solution. We can accept the solution as it is. If we get these defects resolved, the performance of the system is acceptable. I think that there are going to be pieces of the software that the way the software functions that we're going to have to accept as this is the way the software functions for the remainder of us working with this particular company. We don't have, and we've worked very closely with the EMS Bureau and the City Attorney's Office. The way the original contract was, we don't really have language to compel the vendor to fundamentally change the way their software operates in a lot of areas. So the areas that we're trying to concentrate on are the areas that actually have an impact. Maybe they're a legal requirement for the department that, hey, there's no negotiating, we have to do this thing, so their software has to support it. Or it's something that we believe we always had and we're entitled to having in their new version of software. I think if you were to poll the membership and the users, and Dr. Eckstein is here and can speak for the EMS Bureau, we're going to have, like with any major system, we're going to have some users that find it completely acceptable and don't think twice about it, and other members who don't find it that way. So that's why I would hesitate to say all. I think we have done a good job, though, working cooperatively with EMS Bureau and with the vendor to identify those major functional deficits that need to be addressed, and those are codified in this amendment. And if those items are addressed, then I think we're in reasonably good shape to continue at least through the duration of this contract. Fair?
Great, thanks. Well, firstly, I want to recognize the importance of having a chief information officer to help with these sorts of things, because the reason I think partly why we get in sticky situations sometimes with contracts like this is that we didn't have a CIO in the past, and so we ended up with contracts with language that did not perhaps advantage us in circumstances like this. So as I was when you were hired, I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
I know this has been a really difficult issue to work through, and so I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into resolving the problem. Certainly in my travels around the department, this is no longer in the top 5 complaints that I get. We're back to the usual top 5. Which is good. I guess a couple of questions sort of about the future. You said acceptable. Do you mean acceptable as a term of art that is acceptable, or acceptable meaning like a baseline level of performance but not excellent?
Those might be the same thing.
Okay.
It is a baseline. It contractually obligated. This is we are performing our function. We're completing our EPCRs. We're reporting data, even though that's a major issue right now with the county that is on our list that we're trying to resolve. Mm-hmm. Part of it's on the county, part of it's on the vendor. But we're functioning in that manner. And for the most part, we have functional parity with what we had before. So it's a term that I'm using intentionally to say it is acceptable in that it is performing and doing when it wasn't acceptable, mm-hmm. we began to withhold payment, and we've ended up with a settlement of over $1 million, which means we were in agreement that was unacceptable to us.
Yeah.
That was the only thing really I think that motivated the vendor to really get in line with, hey, there are real performance issues that are causing us difficulty. So
Okay. Well, look, and I think I'm pleased to see that you were able to do that. I know last time you were, well, someone was here a year ago. We were talking about this, and that was exactly what this commission, the direction commission was we need to have some recourse here. We need to get some compensation for the fact that this is a wreck of an upgrade. But so the amendment is extended. We're extending an amendment through September of 2019.
Just a clarification, this amendment doesn't extend the term of the agreement. So we're currently in the first of 6 possible 3-year extensions. That extension ends in September of 2019. So if we get to September of 2019 and we decide we're going to stay here, we would execute another 3-year amendment. We're currently in the process working in the department with EMS Bureau to decide sort of what's our next move with electronic patient care report.
Very good.
So we're evaluating all of our alternatives so that, I mean, September 2019 in terms of large projects is like
that's like tomorrow, right? Yeah.
Right. So we're right now actively looking at what all of our alternatives are.
Okay, good. That was going to be my question is, are you considering all the alternatives at this point? Sounds like you are. That is great. And what is the value of this overall contract?
The contract is 10, so it's about 10 years old. It's close to 15 million, so it's about 1.6 million per year, and we're 8 years into it.
Okay, very good. Yep. Okay, so I'm glad it's working. I know this is a mission critical system for us. I appreciate the work you guys have done to protect the department on this, and I look forward to hearing. I imagine if you are going to exercise some sort of option to do something different, we would hear about it relatively soon.
Yep.
In which case, then I look forward to hearing either that we are sticking here or that we're doing something different.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Can I take these items together? Yes. Okay. So I move to adopt the recommendations for items 4C and 5D.
And
Second.
To receive and file, or
Whatever recommendation. Yes, receive and file. And
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
And so that's it. And we have no public comment. So
move to adjourn.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.